Joel Osteen is speaking out this morning, answering critics who say he waited too long to open his Houston megachurch to flood victims. The building, once a 16,000-seat arena, is now filling up with volunteers, supplies, and evacuees.
Lakewood Church once welcomed 45,000 people every Sunday. Now, tens of thousands have quietly stopped coming. What happened to a congregation led by America's best-known prosperity preacher? This was not a sudden scandal. It was a slow collapse of trust. Behind polished sermons, members saw a painful gap between promises and real life. Why did 20,000 regular attendees disappear without explaining why? For many, the answer involved faith, wealth, and disappointment. When hope is delayed too long, even a powerful church can lose people who once believed in it. The sudden drop in attendance. Every Sunday used to bring a sea of faces to the former Compaq Center in Houston, where Joel Osteen preached to more than 45,000 people. Those overflowing parking lots that were once a familiar sight now often have empty spaces, signaling a drastic shift. The overflow rooms, which could seat thousands more, are being shut down, quietly shrinking the physical footprint of a church that once seemed unstoppable. Somewhere near 20,000 regular members have simply stopped showing up, and they aren't moving to other campuses or taking breaks. They have vanished. No official explanation accompanies this exodus, leaving many outsiders puzzled. How could a congregation so successfully built around a message of hope and blessings lose nearly half its weekly attendees without public scandal or dramatic fallout? It's a mystery that goes deeper than headlines would suggest. The departure is not a sudden catastrophe, but rather a slow unraveling that has been gathering momentum below the surface. Hints of dissatisfaction have circulated for years, but only now do they result in such a noticeable drain. The church's internal attendance records and observations from people close to the congregation confirm this steady shrinkage. Yet questions about the cause persist. Why would so many disengage quietly, without fanfare or protest? What lies beneath this fading enthusiasm that powered the nation's largest megachurch? The absence extends beyond numbers. Former members describe feelings of disillusionment and disconnect that don't fit simple explanations like busyness or relocation. This is about a deeper sense of unmet expectations and growing doubts about the church's core message. It suggests a spiritual and emotional shift, one that challenges the foundation of what drew them in initially. Many reasons are whispered in private conversations, but they never really get fully aired out in public. Some people claim there is a widening gap between what is said from the pulpit and what they actually live day to day. Others mention repetitive sermons and a polished but sort of shallow worship experience, as if everything is shiny on the surface and hollow underneath. These clues all point to the idea that something deeper is going on, something that will start to feel clearer once we dig into the church's history and its controversies. The sheer scale of the departure is, well, kind of staggering when you remember that no other big megachurch in the United States has watched anything like this silent walkout unfold. For a religious leader who once seemed to embody prosperity and success, this quiet decline becomes a major concern. It suggests a tension slowly building between the church's outward image and the reality that members seem to perceive for themselves. So it leaves us with the question, what were the promises made to these people, and why did they stop believing them? To find that out, we have to start by tracing how Lakewood Church moved from a smaller congregation into an internationally recognized institution that could pull in massive crowds and wield real influence. Even while the seats gradually thin out, the polished shows keep rolling. Yet below that veneer, the cracks are undeniable, and they hold the story of 20,000 people who chose to go, quietly, but still decisively. There is a story behind those empty seats, one that begins with the unexpected rise of Lakewood Church and the man who transformed it. The rise of Lakewood Church. Lakewood Church's transformation into a megachurch phenomenon was nothing short of extraordinary. When Joel Osteen took the helm from his father in 1999, the congregation was a modest 6,000 members strong. Over the next 5 years, he expanded that number to over 30,000, setting the stage for one of the biggest religious success stories in America. This rapid growth culminated in moving services to Houston's former Compaq Center by 2005, a venue once home to the Houston Rockets basketball team. The renovation was a massive undertaking, with a reported $105 million spent converting the arena into a sanctuary. The main auditorium could seat 16,800 people, while overflow rooms pushed total capacity beyond 45,000. The church's scale now rivaled that of major sports arenas, reflecting the magnitude of its reach and influence. It was a testament to Osteen's ability to draw a crowd with a message designed for the masses. Joel's sermons delivered a simple, optimistic gospel. God loves you, God wants to bless you, and declaring victory over your circumstances will bring abundance. His ministry was Christianity without guilt, prosperity without undue sacrifice, and blessings without heavy burdens. This spiritually uplifting mix resonated with many who sought hope in hard times and preferred a message of positivity. It was a fresh alternative to the more traditional, demanding versions of faith. With book sales running into tens of millions and the sermons shown on television reaching more than 100 countries around the world, Forbes estimated his personal wealth to range between $50 and $100 million. The financial success is attributed to much more than his personal charisma. It is the result of a smoothly running ministry network that has taken advantage of book sales and speaking engagements. Joel Osteen is associated with the prosperity gospel. The swift growth brought with it an entirely new kind of church culture, a dynamic style of worship, slick production, and preaching aimed at success as well as spiritual development. Lakewood Church had become an experience to be offered rather than just another church to attend, aimed at attracting as many people as possible. However, there was an expectation that came hand in hand with this type of exponential growth that was based on a certain theology and picture. It was not about attending church services every Sunday. It was about the emotional and financial investment to receive the promised blessing in return. Prosperity that Osteen preached was supposed to come practically, and it was supposed to change people's lives. It is noteworthy that even in the course of achieving success, there were skeptics who started asking about the sustainability of this approach and what would happen if something went wrong. These questions would become relevant in the further part of the story of Lakewood. The story of growth is inspiring, but growth built on fragile foundations is vulnerable. An issue that came into sharp focus in 2017 when a natural disaster struck Houston with immense force. Hurricane Harvey and its impact. In August 2017, Hurricane Harvey slammed into Houston, bringing catastrophic flooding that displaced over 30,000 residents. Shelters across the city filled up rapidly, and many were expecting Lakewood Church, with its massive 16,000-seat facility built on higher ground, to open its doors immediately as a sanctuary for those in need. The anticipation was high, given the church's size and resources, signaling a chance for community leadership in a crisis. Unexpectedly, Lakewood initially kept its doors closed, releasing a statement claiming the building was inaccessible due to flooding. This explanation did little to satisfy those watching, especially after photos and videos began circulating on social media showing the area around the church dry and the parking garage free of water damage. The apparent contradiction sparked widespread backlash, exposing a disconnect between public expectations and the church's actions. Only after mounting pressure and negative publicity did Lakewood finally open its doors as a shelter for displaced families. Joel Osteen maintained they had always intended to help, but were waiting for the city's official request. For many members and outsiders, however, the delay felt like hesitation or even reluctance to serve at a critical moment. The timing and optics undermined the church's image as a beacon of abundance and generosity. While this controversy did not immediately trigger the mass departure, It planted a seed of doubt that would grow in the years to come. It was a crack in the flawless persona, revealing a vulnerability that some congregants found hard to overlook. The man preaching about God's blessings and abundance hesitated when an urgent, tangible need arose, a contradiction that did not escape those paying close attention. This moment lingered in the minds of many, fueling conversations about trust and authenticity within the church community. It marked the beginning of a subtle shift, where the polished surface no longer fully masked the reality behind the scenes. The gap between promise and practice opened slightly wider, leaving some members uneasy. Hurricane Harvey's impact was felt far beyond the physical destruction. For Lakewood, it became a test not just of facilities, but of faith and leadership credibility. The church's response, or lack thereof at first, added to a growing list of reasons why ordinary members began questioning their allegiance. It was a turning point that preceded further challenges, including unresolved financial mysteries and theological fissures that would deepen the divide between leaders and followers. Those cracks, once hidden, started to surface more boldly in the years that followed. The shadows cast by Harvey's aftermath intersected with troubling financial revelations that would soon rock the church's foundation even further. Financial scandals and transparency issues. In 2021, several years after Hurricane Harvey, Lakewood Church faced a financial controversy that shook many members' trust. A plumber performing routine work discovered hundreds of envelopes filled with cash and checks hidden inside a bathroom wall. The total amount found was around $600,000, tracing back to a theft from March 2014 involving money collected from the church's offering plates. The case had been cold for years, with no arrests or clear answers, making the discovery all the more startling. Joel Osteen was never accused of any involvement, and the investigation remains open. However, for many congregants, the questions multiplied. How could such a large sum go missing in a church equipped with modern security and surveillance systems? Why was the stolen money hidden inside the church building itself instead of disappearing completely? These mysteries fueled speculation and mistrust. Adding another layer of concern, Lakewood had received an insurance payout for the stolen funds shortly after the theft occurred. This meant the church was compensated financially while the stolen cash remained unaccounted for inside the premises. For some members, this raised uncomfortable questions about transparency and how the church handled the situation behind closed doors. The lack of detailed public explanations only deepened the unease. It was not the first time that the church remained silent on an issue that made people question its affairs. It may not be explicitly related to corrupt behavior, but it has certainly helped people realize the dissonance between the polished image the church projected and what was actually happening. The financial management of churches is an important element in all faith communities. In light of the scandal of hidden funds in the church, it became apparent that people questioned the legitimacy of the church's finances. The faithful, who continued making donations, started questioning the authenticity of the management of the funds contributed by them. The church had talked for long about how there would be blessings on those giving in abundance, hence tithes and offerings, which God would multiply. However, the financial controversy brought up a story of a church that made millions, yet did not answer to the members. There seemed to be an increasing disconnect between what the church taught about prosperity and what was going on with their finances. However, the financial scandal became an element of the greater doubts, causing members to wonder what other secrets were being hidden. In spite of Lakewood continuing with its programs and services, this revelation came to a point when faith was pitted against honesty. This growing undercurrent of mistrust would soon meet a theological moment that sparked even greater debate, and for some, irreversible disillusionment. The words spoken from the pulpit took on new weight after the financial glitches, as theological interpretations came under intense scrutiny. The theology under scrutiny. In September 2023, a statement by Victoria Osteen, co-pastor and Joel's wife, ignited a firestorm that reverberated far beyond the walls of Lakewood. During a service, she said, "When you come to church, when you worship Him, you're not doing it for God, really. You're doing it for yourself, because that's what makes God happy." Amen. The clip quickly went viral, sparking widespread criticism and intense theological debate. Critics argued her comment flipped traditional Christian worship teachings on their head. Most Christian denominations emphasize that worship's purpose is to glorify God, focusing on His holiness rather than human benefit. Victoria's statement laid bare a core logic of the prosperity gospel. Faith and worship exist primarily for what God can do for the believer. This blunt admission made many uncomfortable, as it shifted the focus away from God and toward individual gain, making explicit what many had sensed implicitly in Osteen's message. Joel Osteen defended his wife, claiming her words were taken out of context. Yet the clip and its content were clear. For members already wrestling with the church's teachings, this was confirmation that Lakewood's theology was more about personal benefit than spiritual surrender. The prosperity gospel's core promise, blessings for faithful giving and positive declarations, felt increasingly transactional. This theological perspective did not evolve with the times either. While younger generations of Christians questioned traditional megachurch models and sought more nuanced spiritual experiences, Lakewood's message remained remarkably static. Faith was still framed as a formula for financial and personal success, despite mounting evidence that the promised breakthroughs were elusive for many followers. The gap between the ideal and the reality of that message created cognitive dissonance in the congregation. Members gave faithfully and embraced positive affirmations, yet many saw no tangible changes in their lives. This growing disconnect between teaching and lived experience made it harder to believe the message was true or relevant. For some, it triggered a crisis of faith. Not only were there issues of personal disappointment, but the very limited focus of the prosperity gospel raised other theological questions about suffering, inequality, and God's gifts. What does it mean if those who don't prosper are not blessed? These were questions asked by the congregation that Lakewood Church leaders avoided for the most part. This lack of genuine theological discussion left a gap. The members looking for honesty, engagement, and depth in spiritual matters were disappointed by the same repetitive preaching week after week. The slick presentation and optimistic themes seemed more and more artificial, taking them further away from the messy and complicated nature of true faith. The life and vitality of the church started to wane. It was against this background of theological conflict that the church could no longer retain the young members and faithful congregants who once were part of it. The vision of prosperity became a bit faded because of the theological conflicts and expectations that could not be met. With faith shaken and doubts mounting, another deeper rift was becoming impossible to ignore: the widening divide between the church's opulent leadership and the everyday realities faced by its members. Disconnect between wealth and followers. Lakewood Church preaches a message of blessings, abundance, and faith. But for many followers, that message feels harder to believe when they compare their struggles with Joel Osteen's lifestyle. Osteen lives in a $10.5 million River Oaks mansion with 6 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, 3 elevators, and a guest house valued at nearly $3 million. He no longer takes a church salary, relying instead on books and speaking engagements, but members question the contrast. They give, tithe, and stay loyal, believing faith will bring a breakthrough. Yet many remain overwhelmed by bills, debt, and uncertainty. Lakewood reportedly brings in $90 million each year, while members continue waiting for the blessings they were promised. For them, the message of abundance begins to feel distant from the financial reality they face every day. For some, the sermons feel repetitive. Smile, stay positive, speak victory, keep believing. Those messages can bring comfort, but critics say they lack the deeper guidance people need when life becomes painful, complicated, or unfair. The services in Lakewood are refined. The music is impeccable, the lighting is impeccable, and the image of Osteen is upheld. However, spiritual transformation is not always refined. It involves sadness, setbacks, uncertainty, and hard questions. Former members feel like there is hardly any room for that. Without space for honest struggle, some begin to feel unseen rather than spiritually supported. Young Christians are rethinking the concept of megachurches because they see their family members contributing year after year without getting rich, while the popular pastors are living in luxury. This inconsistency has made the concept of prosperity preaching questionable. It also makes some wonder whether the message is truly about faith or about maintaining hope through promises of success. They wonder, if believing in God brings prosperity, then why are so many faithful people still suffering? How come it is so easy to see abundance in those at the top, while the faithful keep waiting in the pews? Many of the former congregants do not question only one pastor or church. What they are questioning is trust. When the idea of the abundant life belongs only to the preacher, while the faithful wait, faith is bound to break down. 20,000 former members left Lakewood Church, not because of a single scandal, but because the hope and abundance they were promised never materialized for them. The gulf between the prosperity gospel's promises and everyday reality grew too wide to ignore. If this story gave you something to think about, like, subscribe, and click the next video on your screen for another look behind the polished image.